It was 5:42 in the morning when the phone shattered the silence of Miami. I was in the kitchen, staring at the red light blinking on the coffee maker, when a voice tore through me like a blade. "Mrs. Loretta Green, this is Memorial Hospital. Your husband Walter has just been admitted. We suspect a stroke. He's in critical condition. You need to come immediately." The words didn't sound real at first. They hung in the air like smoke I couldn't clear from my lungs. My body moved without thought. Shoes half on, purse barely clasped, front door swinging shut. I don't remember locking it. I only remember the weight of the humid Florida air on my skin, the roar of I-95 traffic swelling in the distance, and my heartbeat thundering as if trying to break out of my chest. 3 days later, the scene had shifted from hospital corridors to the damp earth of a cemetery on Miami's east side. Clouds pressed low, heavy with rain. I stood by Walter's grave, draped in black, my knees trembling so violently that Doris, my neighbor of 30 years, held my elbow to steady me. The coffin gleamed under the gray light, polished but hollow. My sons flanked me. Deshaun, the eldest, stood rigid in his tailored suit, his expression arranged into a performance of grief. Tyrone shifted on his heels, restless, tapping his sleeve button as though this was another business appointment to endure. A step behind, Keisha, my daughter-in-law, kept her veil drawn, her manicured nails tapping across her phone as if she were timing how long this formality would take. The pastor's voice rolled over us, deep and steady. "From dust we come, and to dust we return." I bent down, scooped a handful of damp soil, and let it slide through my fingers onto the coffin. The earth felt warm, final. My chest tightened. Then, from the depths of my purse, came a sudden buzz. I fumbled for my phone. The message glowed sharp against the gray day. "I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. Don't trust our sons." The words pierced me harder than the pastor's prayer. My vision blurred. My pulse hammered in my ears. This had to be a cruel prank. Or, God help me, was it possible that Walter wasn't gone? My fingers trembled as I typed, "Who are you?" The reply came instantly, like a blade pressing to my throat. "Can't say. They're watching. Don't eat or drink anything they bring." I nearly dropped the phone into the dirt. The salt air blowing off Biscayne Bay burned my skin as my knees buckled. I gripped the edge of the gravestone to stay upright. My gaze shifted to my children. Deshaun's grief looked too rehearsed, a mask molded for neighbors' eyes. Tyrone rocked back and forth, calculating. Keisha peeked through her veil, lips curved in a crimson smile sharp enough to cut. I looked down at Walter's name etched into the brass plate. Sunlight broke briefly through the clouds, illuminating the letters. Walter Green. My stomach twisted. If this wasn't Walter in the ground, then who was it? As the service ended, Deshaun slipped an arm around my shoulders. "Don't worry, Mom," he murmured, voice smooth as syrup. "I've handled everything. Dad always wanted something simple. Just the basics. That's what he would have wanted." I met his gaze. I didn't see grief. I saw calculation, like numbers aligning on a spreadsheet. Tyrone nodded dutifully, and Keisha smiled brittle, the kind of smile women wear when they've already moved on. Back at the house, silence smothered me. Walter's favorite coffee mug, a white ceramic cup printed with a faded map of Miami, still sat beside the machine. I lifted it, clutched it to my chest. Walter liked his coffee sweet, one packet of brown sugar, and a splash of cream. For some reason, the word sweet echoed in my mind like an alarm. My phone buzzed again. Another message. He kept a note under the blue rag drawer at the shop. Look for the size 13 wrench. My breath caught. The wrench. Walter always joked about it. The size 13 is loyal, Loretta, just like you. Never lets me down. Nobody else knew that. Nobody. I typed back. If this is really you, I'll go tonight. Rain came hard and fast. The kind that only Florida knows. Sheets pouring, streets flooding, then vanishing as if it had never fallen, leaving the air thick with steam. I sat at the kitchen table staring at those messages, my mind seesawing between hope and dread. Was my husband alive, trying to guide me, or was someone using his secrets to twist the knife? Another buzz lit the phone. They'll come soon, with pastry and coffee. Don't touch it. They need you weak, confused. I pressed the phone to my chest, hearing Walter's voice in my memory, warm but firm. Loretta, don't ever let sweetness blind you. The porch steps creaked. Shadows stretched across the window. A voice rang out. Cheerful, too cheerful. Mom, it's us. We brought breakfast for you. The smell of pastry and vanilla coffee seeped beneath the door. My pulse quickened. I stood, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and forced a smile onto my face. This story didn't begin with Walter's death. It began here, when soil hit the coffin and my phone lit up. When I realized that the people standing closest to me might be the very ones tightening the noose. The funeral had ended. The game had just begun, and for the first time in my life, I understood. The deadliest poison wasn't in the cup waiting on the table. It was in the faces of my own flesh and blood. Tonight, I would go to the shop. Tonight, I would open that drawer. If the truth hid with the size 13 wrench, I was ready to find it. It was a Tuesday morning when the call came that shattered my world. I was in the kitchen, cooking Walter's favorite, smothered pork chops and collard greens, when the phone rang. Mrs. Green. The voice was sharp, clinical. Your husband has been rushed to Jackson Memorial Hospital. You need to come immediately. It looks like a sudden collapse. Stroke or seizure. We can't confirm yet. I dropped the pan where it was. My neighbor, Darlene, had to drive me because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every mile felt like an eternity. When we arrived, Deshawn and Tyrone were already there. That puzzled me. No one had called them. I was the emergency contact. Yet there they stood, dressed sharp even in crisis, whispering to each other with tight faces. Mom, Deshawn said, pulling me into a hug. Dad's not good. They think it might have been some kind of chemical exposure at the shop. Chemical exposure? My mind spun. Walter had been fixing bikes and machines for 40 years. He was careful, meticulous. He didn't make mistakes like that. Inside the ICU, I barely recognized him. His skin was pale, his breathing ragged, his body hooked up to a maze of wires and machines. He didn't look like my husband. He looked like a stranger trapped in a failing shell. I grabbed his hand. Walter, it's me. Loretta, I'm here, baby. For a second, just a flicker, I felt him squeeze back, but the nurse brushed it off. Involuntary spasm, ma'am. Don't read too much into it. But I knew better. That was my husband, fighting to tell me something. The next days blurred into a nightmare. I hardly left the hospital. I slept in waiting room chairs, ate whatever Darlene brought me, prayed in whispers only God could hear. And yet, through my tears, I noticed things. Strange things. Deshawn pacing the hallway, making hushed phone calls. Yeah, the policy should pay out fast. No, she doesn't know anything yet. Tyrone asking the doctor about medical bills before he asked about his father's chance of survival. So, if he doesn't make it, the insurance covers it, right? Insurance. Always insurance. Money was all they spoke of while their father fought for his life. On the third day, the doctors pulled us into a small office. Dr. Avery, a man with tired eyes, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Green, your husband's condition is critical. The substance in his blood appears to be ethylene glycol, commonly found in industrial solvents, highly toxic. He has severe organ damage. It's unlikely he'll regain consciousness." Ethylene glycol. I had never heard the name before, but the way the doctor said it, I knew it wasn't an accident. Before I could process the words, Deshawn leaned forward, all business. "Doctor, if we take him off life support, how soon would the death certificate be issued? We need it for the insurance paperwork," I snapped. "Are you out of your mind? That's your father you're talking about, not a claim check." The doctor looked uncomfortable. "It's ultimately your decision, Mrs. Green, but the prognosis is grim." I refused. As long as there's a breath in his body, I'm not signing anything. That night, I sat by Walter's bed, stroking his hand. Tears blurred my vision. "Baby, if you can hear me, give me a sign." His lips trembled. I swear it. No sound, but movement. He was trying to speak. I called the nurse, desperate. But by the time she came, he was still again. 2 days later, at 4:19 a.m., the machines flatlined. Walter was gone. I collapsed against his chest, wailing. 41 years of love ended in silence. Deshawn and Tyrone arrived an hour later, already in suits. They carried folders, contracts, insurance claims. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment. "Mom," Tyrone said gently, too gently, "we've already contacted the funeral home. We'll handle everything." Handle everything. That phrase clung to me like a shadow. The funeral was quick. Too quick. A plain casket. A short sermon. Few mourners. Walter had lived in Miami his whole life, helped countless neighbors fix their bikes, their cars, their appliances. Where were they all? "They didn't need to be bothered," Deshawn explained, checking his Rolex as the pastor spoke. "Dad would have wanted something private." Lies. Walter loved people. He would have wanted the whole community to come, but the real shock came later. A week after the funeral, I went through Walter's desk. Bills, old photos, shop receipts. And then I found it. His handwriting on a scrap of paper. Deshawn pressuring me about insurance again. Says it's for Loretta's security. Doesn't feel right. Don't trust him. My stomach dropped. I kept digging. In a metal box, I found updated policies, life insurance, workers' comp, all signed in the past 6 months. The coverage had ballooned from $10,000 to $100,000. Why had Walter agreed to that? He never told me. Then I saw the bank withdrawals. Thousands gone in chunks. $5,000 in January, $7,500 in February, $10,000 in March. Walter's signature was shaky, unlike his usual bold script. and the bank manager told me he hadn't always come alone. Sometimes Deshawn was with him. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check deeper. They poisoned him. Don't eat or drink anything they give you. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't fate. My sons hadn't just buried their father. They had buried the truth. And now, they were coming for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words on my phone kept flashing in my mind. I'm alive. Don't trust Deshawn or Tyrone. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, its blades spinning slowly, clicking at each turn, echoing the chaos inside my head. Could it be a cruel prank? Or had I truly buried a stranger while my husband was somewhere out there, fighting to survive? The questions gnawed at me until dawn. By morning, I decided to search for answers myself. The first place I went was Walter's workshop in Liberty City. The shop was supposed to be the site of the explosion my sons told me about. But when I pushed the rusty door open, the smell of oil and old wood greeted me just as always. Everything looked untouched. The machines were spotless, too spotless. The welding unit sat perfectly in place. The compressor hummed when I switched it on. No burn marks, no charred walls, not even a scorch on the floor. I whispered, "Where's the accident?" Inside Walter's desk drawer, beneath stacks of old receipts, I found a folded note in his handwriting. Deshawn keeps pushing me about insurance. He says it's for Clara, but something feels off. Tyrone brought papers yesterday about modernizing the shop. I don't trust their intentions. My hands shook as I read it. Walter had suspected them. He had seen the darkness I had been too blind to notice. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Check the bank accounts. Look at the withdrawals. My stomach flipped. Whoever was sending these messages knew far too much. At the bank, Mrs. Ellis, the same teller who had cashed our checks for 30 years, pulled the records for me. She frowned as she turned the screen around. Over the last 3 months, nearly $20,000 had been withdrawn from our savings account. 4 withdrawals. $5,000, $7,000, so $4,000, $3,500. I nearly fainted. Who authorized these? I asked, my voice trembling. She clicked, then hesitated. Mrs. Johnson. The records say it was Walter. He came in person. That can't be, I whispered. Walter would never take that much without telling me. Mrs. Ellis pursed her lips. I do remember one time he came with your son. The tall one, Deshawn. He said Walter had trouble reading the fine print, so he helped him sign. My blood ran cold. Walter never had trouble reading. He wore glasses, yes, but his handwriting was steady, precise. I asked to see the signatures. The ones on file were shaky, uneven, wrong. That's not my husband's hand, I said under my breath. And then it hit me. The money hadn't been for repairs. It hadn't been for bills. It had been siphoned, stolen. Back home, I spread the bank statements across the kitchen table, next to Walter's note. A sick pattern emerged. New insurance policies, withdrawals, pressure to sell the house, the rushed funeral. Pieces were snapping together, but I still couldn't believe it. Could my own sons really poison their father? As if on cue, another message appeared. The poison wasn't from an explosion. They used ethylene glycol, hard to detect without lab tests. Check his medical records. Ethylene glycol. Antifreeze. My heart stopped. I knew that word. In small doses, it caused dizziness, confusion, symptoms that could mimic a stroke. In larger doses, organ failure, coma, death. The hospital had said brain injury, but what if it wasn't? That evening, Deshawn showed up at my door with a bottle of wine. "Thought you could use some company, Mom," he said smoothly, walking in before I answered. He talked casually, too casually, about insurance claims and real estate markets. Then, with a smile too rehearsed, he added, "You don't need to worry about the money. Tyrone and I will manage everything for you. We know what we're doing. Manage everything." I excused myself, went to the bathroom, and locked the door. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and typed to the unknown number. "They're trying to take control of the money. What do I do?" The reply came fast. "Don't sign anything. Don't eat or drink what they give you. They want you gone too." When I came out, Deshawn had poured me a glass of wine. He pushed it toward me with a smile. "Drink, Mom. It'll help you sleep." My stomach turned. I pushed the glass away. "I don't drink." His smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "Suit yourself." But I had seen it. That flicker of irritation, that slip in his mask. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at Walter's empty chair, my hands gripping his ring. The grief was still raw, but now it was laced with something new. Rage. If my sons had truly killed their father for money, then I wasn't just a widow. I was a target. I whispered into the silence of my home. "Walter, if you can hear me, help me be strong. Help me find the truth." And for the first time since his death, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, my phone buzzed with another message. "My name is Stephen Callahan. Walter hired me weeks ago. Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. Corner cafe, back table. Don't tell anyone." My pulse raced. Walter had hired a private investigator. That meant he'd known. He had felt something coming long before I had. At 2:30 the next afternoon, I walked toward the cafe, my heart hammering against my ribs. Liberty City bustled around me, kids playing on sidewalks, music spilling from open windows, the smell of fried chicken and collard greens drifting from corner stores. But I felt eyes everywhere, shadows watching me. I stepped inside the cafe, ordered chamomile tea, and slid into the booth at the back. At exactly 3 us, a tall man in his 50s walked in, carrying a worn leather folder under his arm. His skin was dark, his hair peppered with gray, his eyes sharp but kind. "Mrs. Green?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I'm Stephen Callahan. I'm so sorry for your loss. Walter was a good man." He sat across from me, placing the folder between us. "Before I show you what I've found, I need you to be prepared. This is going to hurt." I straightened my back. "I've been hurting since the funeral. Show me." Stephen pulled out a small recorder and pressed play. Walter's voice filled the space. My breath caught in my throat. "Stephen, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. My boys, they're not the same anymore. Deshawn keeps pushing insurance. Tyrone asks questions about my daily routine, what I eat, what time I leave. I don't trust them. If I die suddenly, don't believe it's an accident." Tears blurred my vision. Hearing Walter's voice again was like being wrapped in his arms, but his words sliced through me, Stephen paused the tape. That was recorded 3 weeks before his death. But there's more. He pressed play again. This time, it was Deshawn's voice, low and urgent. "We can't wait any longer. The old man's starting to get suspicious." "Yeah, I got the ethylene glycol. Works perfect. Looks like a stroke. Mama won't know a thing. Afterward, she'll be so broken we can handle her money easy." My chest tightened. I wanted to scream. Stephen reached across the table, steadying my trembling hands. "There's one more." The recorder clicked again. Tyrone's voice this time. "Tomorrow morning, Deshawn will mix it in his coffee. He thinks it's vitamins. First dizziness, then confusion, then the coma. By the time doctors figure it out, it'll be too late. We'll collect the insurance and move Mom to a home." My stomach lurched. These were my babies. The boys I had fed, held, prayed over at night. And now, they spoke of killing their father, like it was just business. I whispered, How could they?" Stephen slid photographs across the table. In them, Deshawn stood at a hardware store counter, cash in hand, a small bottle visible in the bag he carried out. The date was 5 days before Walter collapsed. "This is him buying the ethylene glycol," Stephen said grimly. "Paid cash, used a fake name, but the camera caught him." Next, he opened bank statements. "Your sons are drowning in debt. Deshawn owes nearly $90,000 to lenders downtown. Tyrone has at least $50,000 in gambling debt. They were desperate. Insurance money was their way out." I covered my mouth, choking back a sob. "Why didn't you go to the police right away?" I asked. "Because they covered their tracks. They bribed the doctor at the hospital, changed the official cause of death to heart complications from a work accident. Without proof of poisoning, my recordings wouldn't hold up." Stephen's eyes hardened. "But now we have everything. Audio, photos, financial records, and I'm not done." He pulled out one last recording. It was both of them this time. Deshawn and Tyrone together. "Once we get Dad's payout, we gotta handle Mom too," Deshawn said. "Can't risk her getting suspicious." "How?" Tyrone asked. "Same way. Slip it in her coffee. But make it look like depression. A widow who couldn't live without her husband. No one will question it." The room spun around me. My vision tunneled. My own sons wanted me dead. Stephen lowered the recorder. "Loretta, they underestimated you. Walter hired me because he feared this. He wanted you protected. Now it's your turn to fight." I wiped my tears, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "Then we go to the police. Tonight. Before they try again." Stephen nodded. "Exactly. Sergeant O'Connell is honest. He'll listen. But we have to move fast. Your sons are already planning to have you declared incompetent tomorrow morning. If that happens, they'll control everything. Your money. Your freedom." I clenched my fists. Not if I stop them first. For the first time since Walter's death, I felt something stronger than grief. Resolve. The morning after meeting Stephen, I woke with a pounding in my chest. I barely slept, haunted by the voices on that recorder, my own sons plotting murder like it was business. At 10 a.m., I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Deshawn, Tyrone, and Keisha stood on my porch. Their smiles were wide, too wide. Keisha carried a white bakery bag. "Morning, Mama," Deshawn said in a syrupy voice. "We brought you your favorite pastries. Thought you could use a little comfort." "Fresh coffee, too," Tyrone added, holding up a thermos. "Special blend. Just for you." My blood turned to ice. Stephen's warning echoed in my mind. Don't eat or drink anything they bring. "Thank you," I said flatly, stepping aside. They swept into the kitchen like they owned the place. Keisha placed the bag on the table, opening the lid with exaggerated care. "Go ahead, Mama," she said sweetly. "Eat while it's still warm." I forced a smile. Already had breakfast. For a fraction of a second, I saw disappointment flicker across her face before she masked it with another sugary grin. We sat around the table. Deshawn leaned forward, clasping his hands like a preacher. "Mama, the neighbors are worried about you," he said softly. "They say you've been acting strange, talking to yourself, not eating." My jaw clenched. Lies. Doris had never said such things. Keisha reached across, patting my hand. "It's just grief, Loretta. Perfectly normal. But sometimes grief can make people imagine things." I pulled my hand back. "I'm fine." Tyrone's voice hardened. "No, you're not. Running around, asking questions about Dad's accident, bothering the police station. It's embarrassing, Mama. You're making yourself look paranoid." Paranoid. The word cut like a knife. "I just want the truth about your father's death," I snapped. Deshawn sighed, like he was tired of a child's tantrum. "Mama, accidents happen. Machines fail. Dad's gone, and we need to accept it. Holding on to wild theories is dangerous." Then came the papers. Deshawn pulled a manila folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "These are for your own good. Retirement homes with excellent care. Specialists who can help you through this stage of life." My stomach churned. "I'm not moving into a home." "You can't live in the past forever," Tyrone said sharply. "Dad's gone. This house is falling apart. You need proper care." Keisha smiled like a cat. "Besides, you'd make friends there. People your age. You wouldn't be so lonely." "This is my home," I said firmly. "I built my life here with Walter. I'm not leaving." The mask cracked. Deshawn's smile faded. His eyes turned cold. "If you won't listen to reason, Mama, we'll have to take stronger steps." My hands trembled. "What does that mean?" "It means," Tyrone said, his voice low and dangerous, "we can have you declared legally incompetent. We've already spoken to Dr. Albright. He signed a preliminary report based on your behavior, says you're suffering from paranoid delusions." I gasped. "He's never even examined me." Deshawn shrugged. "His word will be enough for the court. Once that's done, we'll take over your finances. Make sure you're safe." Safe. The word tasted like poison. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice steady. "And if I refuse?" Deshawn leaned closer, his voice a whisper laced with menace. "Then the court will decide for you." The kitchen felt smaller, the air heavier. They weren't sons anymore. They were predators circling prey. "I need time to think," I said, buying myself a lifeline. "Not too much time," Keisha chimed in with fake sweetness. "For your own good." When they finally left, the silence crashed down like a storm. I stood in the kitchen trembling, staring at the untouched pastries and coffee. They looked harmless, but I knew better. I whispered into the empty house, Walter. They won't break me. I swear they won't. That night, my phone buzzed with another message from Stephen. They're accelerating their plan. Tomorrow morning, they meet Judge Miller at 10 a.m. to start incompetency proceedings. We have to act tonight. I tightened my grip on the phone. My sons thought they could gaslight me into insanity, poison me into silence, and steal the life Walter and I built. But they had underestimated me. They thought I was a grieving old woman too broken to fight. They were about to learn that grief can turn into fire, and I was ready to burn their lies to the ground. That night, after my children's threats still echoed in my ears, I met Stephen Callahan at the Jacksonville police station. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that made your clothes stick to your back. But the real weight I carried was the evidence folder pressed tight against my chest. Sergeant O'Connell, a tall man with graying hair and steady eyes, greeted us at the front desk. He'd known Walter for years, back when my husband fixed bicycles for neighborhood kids. "Mrs. Green, Mr. Callahan," he said with quiet respect. "I'm sorry for your loss. What brings you here tonight?" I swallowed hard. "I need to file a report, Sergeant. My husband wasn't taken by an accident. He was murdered by our own sons." His eyebrows rose. "That's a heavy accusation." Stephen set the folder on the desk. "We have evidence, recordings, financial statements, photographs, enough to warrant an arrest." Inside the small interview room, the truth spilled out. Stephen played the first tape. Walter's voice, trembling but clear. "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Deshawn and Tyrone have been pressuring me about insurance. I don't trust them." Then came the second recording. Deshawn's voice cold and clinical. "I already have the dimethylformamide." Hearing it again nearly broke me, but the sergeant leaned forward, his jaw tight. "This is monstrous." Stephen then laid out the photographs. Deshawn caught on camera leaving a chemical supply store, cash receipt in hand. Bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals. Insurance policies increased suspiciously just months before Walter's death. And finally, Walter's clean bill of health from a Jacksonville clinic, proof that his death had not been natural. O'Connell exhaled sharply. "We'll need the medical examiner to exhume Walter's body. If traces of that chemical are found, it seals the case." "Do it," I said without hesitation. My voice was steadier than I expected. Within the hour, the district attorney arrived. A woman named Carla Mendoza. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. She listened to Stephen's presentation, tapping her pen against her notebook. "This isn't just a family dispute," she said firmly. "This is first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." Her gaze shifted to me. "Mrs. Green, if we move forward, this will go public. Are you prepared for your sons to be arrested and tried?" A lump formed in my throat. I thought of Deshawn's first steps, Tyrone's childish laughter echoing in our backyard. But those boys were long gone. "Yes," I whispered. "They stopped being my sons the moment they killed their father." Plans were set. Warrants would be signed at dawn. O'Connell promised simultaneous arrests at both sons' residences to prevent destruction of evidence. Stephen walked me home. The streets of Jacksonville felt eerily quiet, as if the city itself held its breath. "You did the right thing tonight," he told me gently. "I hope Walter would think so," I murmured. "He would. He hired me because he knew you'd need help carrying this truth." I barely slept. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. Deshawn's voice filled the line. "Mama, something's wrong with Tyrone. Come quick." My grip tightened. It was a trap. Stephen's warning from the night before replayed in my mind. "Don't go anywhere they summon you. The police are moving in." "I'll be right there," I lied, forcing calm into my voice. Instead, I sat by the window clutching my coffee mug, watching dawn creep across the neighborhood. At 7:30 a.m., flashing blue lights streaked past my house, convoys of police cars splitting directions. My phone buzzed again and again with unanswered calls from my sons. By 9 a.m., there was a knock at my door. Sergeant O'Connell stood there, his uniform neat, his expression grave. "It's done," he said. "Both Deshawn and Tyrone are in custody. They'll be charged with first-degree murder of Walter Green and conspiracy to murder you." I staggered back into my chair, my knees buckling. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled a breath that felt like it had been trapped inside my chest since the day of the funeral. O'Connell explained what had happened. At Deshawn's house, he denied everything until the recordings were played. His shoulders slumped, his face ashen. At Tyrone's condo, he tried to escape through the back, sprinting 6 blocks before police tackled him to the ground. Both were now sitting in holding cells, awaiting arraignment. That afternoon, Keisha showed up at my door. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice desperate. "Mrs. Green, please," she begged. "Drop the charges. Deshawn's not a bad man. He just had debts. It was my fault, too. I pushed him. Please, you can't let him rot in prison." I stared at her, feeling no sympathy. "Keisha, your husband poisoned mine. He tried to poison me. That's not desperation. That's murder." "But we're family," she cried. I shook my head. "No. Family protects each other. Family doesn't kill for money." The door closed between us like a final judgment. By evening, the news had spread across Jacksonville. Neighbors knocked on my door, offering food, hugs, whispered condolences. But beneath their kindness, I saw the shock in their eyes. People couldn't believe 2 sons would kill their father for insurance money. Neither could I. Yet as I sat in Walter's old chair, staring at his worn toolbox still resting on the porch, I knew one truth with certainty. My sons had chosen greed over love. And now, the law would choose justice over blood. The trial began on a gray Monday morning, the Florida sky heavy as if it carried the weight of everything I had endured. Outside the Jacksonville courthouse, reporters crowded the steps. Cameras flashed, voices overlapped. Questions flew like arrows. I held my head high, clutching my leather handbag like armor, and walked past without a word. Stephen stayed close, guiding me through the chaos, while Doris whispered at my side, "Keep strong, Loretta." Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Every bench was filled. Neighbors from our old block, members of Walter's church, customers from his repair shop, and journalists from across the state. It felt like the entire world had come to witness the Green family unravel. Some eyes held sympathy, others, morbid curiosity. At the defense table sat Marcus and David, my own sons. They were shackled, dressed in orange uniforms instead of polished suits. Marcus looked hollow, arrogance drained away. David sat rigid, jaw clenched, refusing to meet my eyes. I searched for the boys Walter and I once raised, the children who learned to fish at the river, who laughed on Christmas morning. But all I saw were strangers. The prosecutor, Elaine Carter, began with a voice sharp enough to cut stone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said, "this case is not about debt or desperation. This is about betrayal, the deliberate murder of a father and the plotted murder of a mother. Marcus and David Green killed their father, Walter Green, for money. And when Loretta Green stood in their way, they conspired to silence her too." Her words sank like knives. Piece by piece, she laid out the evidence. Marcus's crushing debt of over $100,000, David's gambling losses near $80,000. They weren't just reckless. They were drowning and greedy enough to claw out by killing the man who had given them life. Stephen's recordings played next. Marcus's calm voice filled the courtroom. "Methylene chloride mimics a stroke. By the time doctors notice, it'll be too late." Then David, mocking, "Dad trusts us so much, he won't see it coming." Gasps rippled through the room. Even the judge leaned forward, his face hardening at the cruelty. When it was my turn to testify, my knees shook as I swore the oath. I clung to the wooden arms of the chair, grounding myself. Elaine asked about my marriage, about Walter. I spoke of beginnings in a small apartment. Walter fixing bikes, me sewing dresses, raising Marcus and David with every ounce of love we had. I told the jury about Sunday fishing trips, bedtime stories, laughter in our kitchen. Then my voice lowered as I described the change, the distance, the sharp words, the way money twisted them until they were no longer suns but shadows. Finally, I told the court about the notes Walter left, the forged bank records, the insurance policies. And then, with every eye fixed on me, I described the night I heard the recordings. In that moment, I said, locking eyes with Marcus and David, I realized my sons had already died. The children I once loved were gone. These men are predators. The defense tried to paint me as grief-stricken, paranoid, confused. Their lawyer suggested the recordings were misunderstood, that Marcus and David were victims of circumstance. But the jury saw the photographs of Marcus buying the chemical, the bank statements with forged signatures, the medical report confirming poison in Walter's blood. The jury shifted uneasily. The judge's gavel struck once for silence, but the horror lingered like smoke. Elaine's closing argument was fire. They planned. They poisoned. They plotted to kill their mother. This is not weakness or panic. This is cold-blooded murder. If we do not deliver justice here, what hope is there for any family? The jury deliberated 6 hours. I sat with my hands clenched in prayer, heart pounding like thunder. When they returned, the room hushed. The foreman handed the paper to the judge. My breath caught. "On the charge of first-degree murder of Walter Green," the judge read, "we find the defendants, Marcus Green and David Green, guilty." Gasps filled the courtroom. "On the charge of conspiracy to murder Loretta Green, guilty." Marcus crumpled into his chair, burying his face in his hands. David stared blankly, eyes glistening but tears unshed. The judge's voice carried finality. "For the premeditated murder of your father and conspiracy to murder your mother, I sentence you both to life in prison, without parole for 30 years. The gavel struck, echoing like thunder. I sat frozen, breath shallow. I neither wept nor smiled. I simply folded my hands, closed my eyes, and let the storm inside me settle. Justice had been served. Walter's voice had not been silenced in vain. As bailiffs led my sons away, Marcus glanced back once, shame flickering across his face. David never turned at all. The heavy doors closed, and I whispered a prayer, not for their freedom, but for their souls. When I stepped outside, the Florida sun was setting, painting the city in a red glow. The world felt raw, but new. I had faced betrayal, stood in the light of truth, and though I had lost nearly everything, I had survived. The trial ended, but the echoes of it lingered in every corner of Jacksonville. People stopped me on the street, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. My story was splashed across headlines. Sons sentenced to life for father's murder. Widow exposes deadly family betrayal. I hated the attention, yet I understood why it mattered. Our tragedy had become more than just mine. It was a mirror held up to the community, a warning of what greed can do to blood. For weeks after the sentencing, I wandered my house in silence. Walter's tools still lined the porch. His coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, untouched since that morning before the accident. Sometimes I'd reach for it, just to trace the rim with my finger. The nights were the worst. I would sit on the porch, where we once drank sweet tea together, listening to the hum of cicadas, and imagine him rocking in his chair beside me. I whispered to him about the trial, about how strong I had been, how I hadn't let Deshawn or Tyrone intimidate me, but always my words ended in tears. Stephen Callahan, the private investigator who had saved my life, visited often. At first, it was strictly business, checking in to make sure I was safe, updating me on the appeals process. But slowly, his visits became something more. One afternoon, he brought me a box of gardenias. "Walter told me they were your favorite," he said softly. I pressed my face to the flowers, breathing in their fragrance. "They were ours," I corrected. "He planted them for me every spring." Stephen gave me a smile that was equal parts gentle and sad. "Maybe we can plant some together." And so we did. Week by week, Walter's old workshop was transformed into a garden. Rows of sunflowers, violets, and roses sprouted where rusted tools once stood. It was my therapy, my way of turning something broken into beauty. But even as I healed, guilt gnawed at me. Neighbors sometimes asked, "Do you miss your sons?" I always hesitated. The truth was complicated. I missed the boys they had been, the ones who hugged me after school, who fell asleep on Walter's chest after fishing trips. But I did not miss the men they became. Those men had died to me long before the judge pronounced their sentence. And yet, the ache of losing both husband and sons in 1 year was nearly unbearable. One night, staring at the stars, I made a decision. Their betrayal would not be the final chapter of my story. With Stephen's encouragement, I founded the Walter Green Foundation for victims of family crimes. I used part of my savings, not the insurance money, which felt tainted with blood, but my own modest funds, to establish it. The mission was simple but powerful: provide support, legal aid, and therapy for families torn apart by betrayal, greed, or abuse. At first, I doubted anyone would come. Who would step forward, ashamed to admit that their own flesh and blood had harmed them? But within months, people began to arrive. There was Denise, a 42-year-old mother whose brother tried to steal her inheritance by forging documents. She cried in my kitchen for hours, then left with the name of a lawyer we provided. There was Marlon, a young man who discovered his uncle had siphoned off his disabled mother's care funds. We helped him press charges. And there was Ella, whose story nearly broke me. Her 2 cousins had poisoned their grandmother for a piece of property. Listening to her felt like reliving my own nightmare. Yet, it also reminded me why the foundation mattered. For each story of betrayal, there was also one of resilience. People walked into our office shattered and walked out stronger, armed with tools to fight back. And every time someone hugged me, whispering, "You gave me hope," I felt Walter's presence, as if he was nodding from heaven. 6 months after the foundation opened, I received a letter from prison. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from Deshawn. "Mama, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I see Daddy in my dreams every night. I can't wash his blood off my hands. I wanted to be someone, to escape debt, but I destroyed everything. I'm sorry." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a shoebox with others I had received. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, but I also couldn't reply. Forgiveness was a mountain I wasn't ready to climb. Meanwhile, Tyrone's mental state unraveled quickly. Word came from the prison chaplain that he suffered hallucinations, claiming Walter visited him at night. He had tried to harm himself more than once. Some neighbors asked if I felt vindicated, if their suffering gave me peace. The answer was no. I didn't rejoice in their downfall. Justice was necessary, but it wasn't sweet. It was simply fair. And sometimes fairness feels like ash on the tongue. By the 1-year anniversary of Walter's death, the foundation had grown beyond what I imagined. We partnered with local lawyers, therapists, even police officers who volunteered to teach families about financial scams and abuse prevention. At our first memorial service, over 200 people gathered. Some were survivors we had helped. Others were strangers who had heard our story and wanted to honor Walter. Stephen spoke that evening, his voice steady and warm. Walter Green's life was stolen by greed, but his legacy, through Loretta's courage, is saving lives. Evil tried to silence him, but good turned his story into hope. I wept openly, not just from grief, but from gratitude. At 70 years old, I learned a truth I wish I had known sooner. Family is not always blood. Family is whoever loves you without turning that love into harm. My sons were gone, but I was not alone. I had Stephen. I had my community. I had the foundation. And I had Walter's memory, alive in every flower I planted and every victim we helped. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the Jacksonville sky in shades of gold and purple, Stephen joined me on the porch. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Turning them in," I replied. "Yes." I looked at him, then at the gardenias blooming in the yard. "Never. The truth hurts, but lies kill the soul. Walter deserved justice, and I deserved peace." Stephen nodded, his eyes warm. "And you've built something beautiful from the ashes." I smiled faintly. "Not alone. Walter planted the seeds. I just made sure they grew." 5 years have passed since that gray morning when I stood at Walter's grave and received the message that changed my life forever. I am 71 now. My hair is silver, my hands lined with years of work, love, and grief. Yet my eyes, so my dear friend Doris says, shine with a peace they never had before. Jacksonville, the city where betrayal once shattered me, has now become the place where I rebuilt myself. The house Walter and I lived in is still mine. The walls have been repainted a soft yellow, his favorite color, and his workshop is now the most vibrant garden on the block. Red roses, tall sunflowers, and gardenias bloom side by side, reminding me daily that beauty can grow from broken soil. Every Sunday morning, I cut fresh flowers and take them to Walter's grave. His headstone reads, "Walter Green, beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man. His love was stronger than his death." I tell him everything about the families the foundation has helped, about Stephen's visits, about the thank you letters I receive from strangers across the country. Sometimes, when the wind stirs the trees, I swear I feel his presence, proud of me for keeping my promise. The Walter Green Foundation has become bigger than I ever imagined. What started as one woman's grief has turned into a lifeline for hundreds of families. Just last month, we hosted a conference on financial abuse and family betrayal. Judges, police officers, and counselors attended. Survivors stood up and shared their stories, some for the first time. One woman sobbed as she told the crowd how her own daughter tried to steal her retirement savings. Another man described how his cousins manipulated their grandmother into signing over property. Each story was a wound, but each was also a spark of resilience. Afterward, a young woman hugged me tightly. "Mrs. Green, if you hadn't shared your story, I would have stayed silent. You gave me courage." In moments like that, I know Walter's death was not in vain. As for my sons, Deshaun writes occasionally, his letters are filled with regret, apologies, promises of redemption. He says he has found God in prison, that he leads Bible studies for other inmates. I don't know if it's true, but I hope so. Redemption, however late, is still redemption. Tyrone's mind never recovered. He lives in the prison's psychiatric ward, haunted by visions of Walter visiting him at night. Some say it's guilt. Others say it's madness. Perhaps it is both. I no longer read their letters. I keep them in a shoebox, unopened. Forgiveness may come one day, but for now, I protect my peace. And Keisha. She vanished from Jacksonville soon after the trial, her reputation scorched by the scandal. I sometimes wonder if she knew of the plan, if she whispered poison into my son's ears. But those questions belong to the past. I have learned not to chase shadows. This year, on the 5th anniversary of Walter's death, the foundation hosted a memorial service in his honor. Over 200 people attended, neighbors, foundation members, even city officials. Stephen gave the speech. His voice was steady, rich with emotion. Walter Green was taken by greed, but through Loretta's courage, his story became a beacon of hope. Evil tried to end him, but love and justice carried his name forward. The crowd stood, clapping, some crying. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt not just sorrow, but joy. Later the tea evening, Stephen and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the city. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. "I wish Walter were still here. I wish my sons hadn't lost their souls to greed, but wishing doesn't change the truth. And the truth is, we survived. We turned tragedy into something greater." Stephen reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. Sometimes I still look through old photographs of Deshawn and Tyrone as little boys. I see them laughing in the yard, Walter tossing them in the air, me holding them close on Christmas morning. I allow myself to cry for those children, innocent, full of promise. But I do not cry for the men they became. That grief is gone. In its place is resolve. A reporter recently asked me what advice I would give to people facing betrayal by family. I told her this: family is not an excuse for crime. Love without boundaries is not love. It is weakness. If someone who claims to love you is capable of harming you for money or convenience, then that person doesn't truly love you, and it is never too late to seek justice, no matter who the culprit is. That night, I sat again on my porch, the Florida breeze carrying the scent of gardenias. I thought about Walter, about the girl I was when I first met him, about the woman I had become since losing him. I realized something. I was no longer just a widow, no longer just a victim. I was a survivor, a builder, a protector of others. My legacy, and Walter's, was not in the pain we endured, but in the hope we inspired. And that, I knew, was stronger than betrayal.